Good morning, and thank you very much for this invitation. It's an honor to be in this exhibition, and to be able to talk via technology. Technology doesn't quite always work. What I'll do is, since I've cut into my time a lot, I will try to be as brief as possible, and okay. That seems. I wish I could get rid of this stuff at the bottom. Anyway, I can't seem to get rid of the. There it is. Okay. What I would like to do is maybe briefly go through the slides that I had prepared, because they're very relevant to this whole condition of postmodern. This is an exceptional exhibition, which has been very inclusive. Especially postmodernism began very much with two books, really. In fact, by the Robert Venturi and Denise Scott Brown. Okay. And it was kind of became permissible to use signage or to celebrate signage, because so much of modern architecture and modernism and construction didn't use these images to great effect, and they applauded places like Las Vegas, which in fact hyperbolized public communication. So what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about today was economy of means, not spending a fortune doing this kind of work and communicating, but also looking at the future of architecture, which has to be more restrained in its ways. There was, of course, the two books, one of which I contributed to with the postmodernism at the V&A, and then there's Charles Jenks. And what happened, what became identified with, unfortunately, was a kind of historical referencing and decor. And so, in effect, it became hyperbolized in the media just because of certain visual effects and certain ways of working. And of course, it translated into pop culture, and there was a permission to actually, for artists to not paint paintings by hand anymore, but they could access technology and the computer and reproduction as part of the concept. So you got into the situation where an idea was the big point. And the one thing that the exhibition in Bonn has done, which no other coverage of postmodern has achieved, it's celebrated the other aspects, like performance art, like people like Kusama and Joseph Beuys, Nam June Pike, conceptual art. It's personified here by Joseph Kassuth, environmental art, Robert Smithson, and installation art, like Davian Hirst, and what I call art chart, which I will discuss today, using Rachel Whiteread as an example. And then, of course, this is filtered in to Beeple and digital art as well. Well, the big issue has been, and the big change was also inherent in postmodernism. Modernism was a big factor. Was sitting at a computer all day. The programmer controlling the personalization of ideas. That was the very big issue. And then, of course, came CAD, and every architect in the world realized you could make any kind of shape you wanted. Sadly, a lot of the references to shape making and so much of architecture, which is so expensive, is borrowing or cribbing a lot from 1950s sculpture, like Henry Moore and Jean Arp and early Brancusi and so forth. But anyway, what we have in architecture is a product of the computer. Is pretty much every city in the world is beginning to look exactly alike, and that's a big problem. And part of this, of course, is the issue is a kind of a macho issue that I guess a lot of developers have feel, like Mr. Trump feel underendowed in some way, and so there's this obsession to build bigger and larger and taller towers. And at the other end of the new revolution, of course, is a selfie, which is not unlike Donald Trump. It's sort of an ego trip, but there's a departure from reality. You're living totally within the context of technology, and it brings up the whole theory of simulacra from Jean Baudrillard, who expressed it very well by saying that what's simulated is far more intense than what's real. So the simulated is more real, and it's substituted. It's the place of the reality. And then, of course, there's a kind of unreality of computer expression, the liberation of every designer to do any shape he wants. Not all of them are obviously art, but it has given this kind of obsession with digital technology. So what I'm going to talk about today is almost a polar opposite, what I call art, and it was a movement I was a participant in, of course, and it started in the late '60s, early '70s, and it was the capacity of artists to use architecture as a subject matter for art. And I told you I wrote an essay for the original Victoria and Albert Museum catalog, and also I have an interview in the current one, and I want to applaud the current exhibition in Bonn for including people like Michel Foucault, Jean Baudrillard, Jacques Derrida, Robert Smithson, Joseph Beuys, Gordon Malaclark, Vito Acconci, Alice Aycock, David Lynch, Richard Foreman, and Laurie Anderson. And I said, unfortunately, in the building arts, the poemal imagery of choice seemed to quickly congeal into a litany of predictable stylistic devices, and in some cases, a cloyingly decorous form of mannerism. And that's essentially why the art movement has been the opposite. It's been much more frugal in its use of materials and situations, really. And as I say, this is kind of a panoramic overview. And so a lot of it was inspired, of course, as I think all of the environmental artists and conceptual artists were, by Marcel Duchamp, who basically said, I'm interested in ideas, not mere visual products. So shape making and form making, obviously you could see it, but basically Duchamp dealt with space in a wholly different ways. As in the first Surrealist exhibition, you kind of making by keeping away. So you couldn't enter the gallery because of his contribution to the exhibition. So I like this idea of economy means. Pablo Picasso said, forcing yourself to use restricted means is a sort of restraint that liberates invention. It obliges you to make the kind of progress you can't even imagine in advance. So I'm just going to show you that some of the art that took place. Gordon Malaclark is actually splitting a house in New Jersey, so that the actual incision in the house became this kind of preservation of the house. So it was kind of preservation by demolition because it became a work of art. He did the same thing kind of as a comment on the neo-modernism, neo-constructivism of the Pompidou Center, and he chucked a hole that called conical insect into the House buildings that were being torn down. Then you have Gianni Petrina in Italy, who was teaching in the United States, and transformed a neighborhood house by covering completely in earth. So it was kind of an ecological statement as well. And his ice house in Minneapolis during the winter, he and the students, poured water over an abandoned school building and we created the ice house. And then, of course, Vito Acconci in Austria, tilting an entire room. Just changing in his exhibition for the Mock Vienna, changing the entire context. The final Rachel White-Read is an amazing artist. She really casts reproductions of the interior of space as the exterior, and of course, did a very poignant Holocaust memorial by casting the interior of a gas chamber and making it the memorial to the exhibition. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about site, what our work is involved. We, Koji mentioned that we did a series of buildings for Best Products building, basically using the prototype. There was the big box store was ubiquitous on all highways in America. And so rather than just conventional signage, which they always use, we transformed it socially, psychologically, and in a sense, architecture became a critique of itself. People often say, "Oh well, it's all about demolition and ruin." That's not really true. It's about process, coming or going. And I've always felt it was more interesting to see a building either being built or taken away, and that was, of course, architecture as a subject matter for art. And so we went on to do a whole series of these buildings. I'll show you buildings that moved. For example, you push a button, and instead of the pedestrian moving, the building moves to let you in. So you have a public space, you have an individual piece of sculpture when it's open, and you have a entrance for the building. These are just other buildings, taking buildings apart and space, so that you're really seeing all dimensions. I mean, you can address the building at any scale you feel comfortable with. This is another building inside outside. We're asked to celebrate what they do. The owners, Sidney and Francis Lewis, always say, well, you never celebrate what we do. So we did. We did a thermal barrier. So inside everything is real, and everything outside is cast. So we took the entire inside-outside relationship, totally unconventional way of display, appeal to children because they see a bicycle half inside and half outside. So inside outside, unlike the Pompidou Center, which claims to be an inside-outside building, it was not a formalist statement, but an incision statement in the building itself. And we went on to the things like the Tilt building, which is really, I feel, sort of the real deconstructivist endeavor. It was minimal, which I always have believed in, and it changed the whole meaning of the building. And I have great admiration for two of my colleagues, Fuchsas and Frank Gehry, of course. But their tilting of buildings was far more complex, and in my kind of a minimal sensibility, a little bit of an overkill. So you're really spending a lot of extra money. Whereas the thing about minimalism, it makes the viewer think about something. It's what it makes you think about. Then I had did some, of course, things in green architecture. With the last of the best buildings, we incorporated the landscape. We just left the landscape as it is and built the landscape around the existing trade. It's total opposite of conventional landscape architecture, which is always plunking down lollipop trees and sculpture and benches. And so we again use nature, the invasion of nature, to transform space, inside, outside. And it even since it was on the hillside, we even showed the underground. So all aspects of living nature in its natural state were preserved and celebrated. We did another one like that in Florida, which was a rainforest building. The recycled water went up and down the building, and we had a garden inside, of course. And we did a lot of public spaces, using really what I call trigger elements. Things that you would do that aren't just conventional seating or conventional lollipop trees and so forth, but it would in some way change people's minds about something, rethink public space. One of the earlier pieces that we did was the ghost parking lot, which was since automobiles consume petroleum, in this case, the petroleum consumes the cars, and instead of being like the examples at the top, which are public art, but they're not contextual. In the case of the ghost parking lot, you could not possibly remove this, put it in a museum without a total loss of meaning. So it's an intrinsic, including its building process. Asphalting over the cars was in fact intrinsic to the context itself. So the context and the public art became one and the same. I went on to do a number of works of what I call economy of means, a entranceway to the Mock Vienna bookstore. They told us we couldn't operate on the building, we couldn't destroy it in any way. So what I said, okay, what if I take a piece of the building, a historic piece, and call it public art? It is public art, but it includes everything of the building. So it's a preservation of the existing building as a work of public art. We went on to do some large public spaces. The virtues I like to talk about is almost all of these things are recycling. They are collages of existing materials that are usually part of junk culture, and we recycled them. In this case, we told the story of 20th century transportation. We monochromed everything with it. But these are all real objects, and it gave it kind of a ghostly, critical view of transportation. Cars shooting into space, the airplane and the police car going underwater at high tide. So it involved people. One of to me the greatest advantages of any public space is the engagement of people, and we had about 200,000 people a day engaged on this project, and it also made people look good to each other by being monochrome and being kind of sardonic about transportation technology. It also hyperbolized the colors, activities, and the nuances of personality of the visitors themselves. This is a project actually on the other side of the railway station. This is in Yokohama, Japan, and what we did, they asked us to do a children's plaza for children, sponsored by Isuzu Car Company. And the director of the Isuzu, he liked it. He wanted to do something like the Japanese garden, something like astronauts in space, and naturally to celebrate the Isuzu car. So what we did, we totally inverted the whole plaza. We cast citizens of Yokohama, the people living in the community, whole families, in fact. Here's the process of doing it. And we made an invisible plane. So everything was reversed. And we celebrated the car, we celebrated the roots of the trees, we celebrated everything was in reverse with an invisible foreplane. And as you can see, children loved it because again it engaged people in the public domain because a young boy could jump on his father's feet, for example. And of course we celebrated the Isuzu car. They were very proud of their transmission, and that was evident throughout the whole project. This is another economy of means project. Willie Smith, who was the first really great Black American fashion designer, did street fashion, as he called it. And as he said, I don't do clothes for the Queen. I make clothes for the people who watch the Queen go by. And when we were talking about doing his showrooms and his stories, said I want to do the exact opposite of a Ralph Lauren. I'm the polar opposite in my ideas and fashion design. So we made it all from junk culture. This was totally. And again, economy of means to the fashion show experience. And we also did Willie Smith's whole office from just the refuge from a construction site right across the street on 6th Avenue. And to sort of end this thing, I wanted to talk a little bit about the environment and incorporate the environment. We did a sculpture park in Italy, in Briosco, and we did the pavilion for visitors and like has a restaurant and a cafe. And what we did is we realized that the entire area was defined by that monastery in the background and all the wall system. So what we did is we took the actual wall system and incorporated the building. And so the building is the wall, and the wall is the building. So we just extended what was already there. So you can see it's this thing flowing in, and then we kept the landscape and just moved it upward in space. So in a sense, the building became the landscape. There was a total integration from the existence of the structure and its surroundings. We also developed a cast stone module, a T-shaped column, which was used for sculpture bases and support and the whole construction of the building. And it was on a beautiful farming area, and on a clear day, you could see the Swiss Alps from the site. And so we use this device to define inside and outside. We had all glass, so you could see the Alps during the day, as well as the sculpture garden. And again, for the whole property was defined by the wall. So by extending the wall already existed in part. We just extended it to be the vocabulary and the iconography and the identity of this particular place. This was opening day. You can see how it would engage people. This was a children's toy exhibition on that day. And here is the relationship to the monastery in the background. You can see the monastery. You can see through the building. You can see the wall coming down, and then you can see how the wall has extended into the building itself. Well, in conclusion, I just want to say that there are other ways to think about the built environment, both architecture and public space. Certainly, recycling and an economy of means are one of them. Every city in the world looks like Toronto now, as you know. No, it's kind of overkill. I wanted to conclude with just one project that we pursued for years, which is really what Duchamp called can chances, where you would build a medium high-rise building, but the identity of the people, unlike modern architecture, even in Le Corbusier and Brooklyn Queens Expressway, where people have no identity. People could have their own identity in a public building, and it was very much based on the early 1920s Sears Roebuck catalog of houses. You could order up your own house. You could have the component parts. So we're going to prepare component parts. You order them up, and you can build a completely different identity. And it's, again, it's just sort of the total opposite, contrary to Mr. Trump and his development policies. But anyway, houses in the sky, they're very influenced by our project, but they're all designed by architects. These houses in the sky idea, which is proliferated all over the world now, it's had a big influence, even though it was an unbuilt project, are really more about what the artist or architect impose. So in conclusion, I just wanted to say that we are asking ourselves this question. I'm sure a lot of architects and young architects today are asking the same question: what, if anything, did we do right? And the one thing is the integration of architecture and the environment, the uses of collage and found objects, recycling, materials, adaptive reuse. These are all very important. So this is a little sketch of myself I did during the Trump era. And it's sort of the way I feel, of kind of rethinking it all. So we're really in a rethinking era, which I think is very important. And some of my forthcoming lectures are really about how to rethink dangerous ideas, using architecture as a kind of public commentary. I'm doing AI lectures. Again, and what is the human brain capacity, and what is the capacity of AI? And the secret to it all is really an actual fact that I found that the human brain is 250 million billion more times complex in its connection than AI. So we don't want to always think in a linear way either. We want to use the brains. So basically, I'm saying that there is another way. There are other ways to think about the environment, and that's the end. And they are our economy of means, rethinking it all, and looking at nature's revenge, which of course is a big factor, and then trying to say more with less. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you so much, James, for leading us right into the nature of your work and for this incredible presentation. And on behalf of the technical team, I would like to apologize for the technical difficulties in the beginning. Now we're in it. Simon Denny is entering the stage, and I'm excited for the conversation of the two of you. Thank you, Simon.
Okay.
Okay.
This is so trippy and postmodern in a kind of cartoonic way. But I don't know how many people can see things out in the audience. James, can you hear me first of all? James, can you hear me?
I can see. Yeah.
Oh, fabulous! I just want to describe to you what's happening here on the stage. You're on a monitor, and I'm talking to the monitor next to you, sitting on a couch, which is very textbook postmodern in a way. I feel like I'm talking to.
This postmodern seemed to work better than technology for my life.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for an incredible insight into the work that you've been doing that has inspired me for so long, but also countless others. As you ended on your high rise of individual homes has inspired many people to do many things that resonate with those ideas. I prepared a little slide deck here that starts with some things of James's that have spoke to me very directly, and then a few projects that I think were somehow influenced by your approach in my own work, and then maybe I'll kind of go through those, and then maybe we can speak to each other about kind of some of the themes that I think are resonant between the two practices.
Okay.
Cool. So yeah, I started this in a kind of a cheeky fashion. This is a recent site work, a Denny's fast food chain, which I was very happy to see. Actually, I didn't know this before I was preparing this talk that you actually did this. So I mean. One of the things that I want to return to in the conversation is to ask you a little bit about this building, but maybe we just do that right away. James, do you want to talk about this commission?
Well, no, this is for Denny's, and you know, they pride themselves on communication, so it was the idea of networking. They always talk about networking. So in a way, the whole building is a fragile network. It is interesting enough, the building within a building, and so it does. It's really about, you know, the skill of the Zahner company in doing it, which was not easy, because to make a thin network like that really work in space. But that was a basic point. It was, in a sense, giving their entire history of the restaurants, which are considered assets to networking, a visual manifestation.
So beautiful. Thank you for that. I mean, you talked a great deal about this iconic work you did for Best. This was one of the first projects I think probably many people encounter of your practice. Certainly, it was the first body of work that I encountered. These are maquettes that I pulled from photographing somebody else's presentation about the MoMA show that happened at the same time, I think, with the Best proposals, because it was another situation where many architects were asked to do a proposal, right, and yours were chosen from that. Is that correct?
Well, it began basically as a art collector. Sidney and Francis Lewis, who was the owners of the Best company.
Right. These guys, yeah,
kind of a big box merchandiser. Were big collectors of art. They were avid collectors, and mainly pop art. So they had a orientation toward art having content. In other words, art was not just formalist expression of some kind. It could, in fact, say things. And so we started working with them, and we started making all kinds of proposals that they wanted a piece of public art in front of their building. And I said, well, why don't we make the whole building into the art piece? And that resonated with them, and then the variations we're not done in competition with anybody. They were just a competition with ourselves in a way. So we just kept thinking of ways and those probably 100 different ways of thinking about, and we tried to figure out the one that would work best in the location and would work in somehow transforming either by reflection or by, in the case, peeling or lifting or making the entire building into its own definition. All of these things were inherently part of this architectural intention.
I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned the commissioning process and the commissioners. I pulled out a book that I love, that I return to very often, of Andy Warhol's 1978 or 79 Whitney show, art of the portraits of the 70s, which was and here are two works, actually 4 works, I guess, 2 series of pairs of portraits of the Lewises from the Warhol Commission series. This is my favorite period of Warhol. And this is the installation that was in the Whitney, this kind of checkerboard. He put this really interesting. You maybe know this. I don't know if you went to see this show, James, but what I heard was. Say that again.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Oh, amazing! Because I heard that Warhol's business of doing commissioned portraits. The criteria for getting into the Whitney show was that you had commissioned at least 2. So there were people that had commissioned only one, and they were not eligible for entry into the show. And if you commissioned at least 2, then you could be in the Whitney show, which I thought was a really interesting self-reflexive gesture in the face of what I think is a kind of pioneering example. And I'm not the only person to assert this idea, but it resonates me of a pioneering example of network art in a way. So network enabled art practice, like your Denny's restaurant is to me, this showing the people that are paying for the art, the people that are making the value in a certain sense is part of his work. And it's so interesting to me.
We both agree. I mean, the one thing is that I had, when we talked before, I said this was not my favorite period, but you sort of changed my mind because I began to think of it in a sociological sense. And yes, painting a soup can or Marilyn Monroe or Elvis or something, you're transforming iconic images, but in this case, it extends it to the whole human system, the whole, as you say, the networking system, and it becomes a transformation again, not hand painted, which is of course the brilliance of Warhol anyway. I mean, the fact that it was the idea of it, and not necessarily the execution being looked at.
Exactly, and I just think that's an amazing, maybe not a coincidence, but an amazing resonance that the people commissioning your most known buildings were also the people involved in this network. And I mean, another thing that you didn't talk about in your presentation, but I'd love to invite you to hear a bit more about, is another fast food chain intervention that you did as part of SITE. The McDonald's building, which was partially raised in a certain section. Can you talk a little bit about the process of making this?
McDonald's? Yeah, well, this is a very interesting thing. The owner of the property was a collector of SITE's work, and had built. Well, he was the builder of the Ghost parking lot. So McDonald's wanted this piece of prime property because it's very near where Ray Kroc, the founder, was born. So we had a meeting with the president of McDonald's, and his first remark was great. He said, "Mr. Wines, I understand that you're known for being very creative. Well, you can be as creative as you want, but you can't change anything." And that was the way we started the commission. And so, okay, I thought I won't change anything. So we didn't change anything. We just took their mansard roof style and popped it. And so it all came apart. And it was quite successful because it had a kind of a clear story, and you could recognize your friends by their feet under the building, and it became quite popular.
I bet.
And I think somebody filled it in. Believe it or not, somebody went later on and filled the thing in. But
because the building still exists, right?
It was one of the ones that was most published in Time and Newsweek and many international publications. Just because, again, it was using the existing icon and transforming its meaning, converting the meaning.
Yeah, best McDonald's ever for sure. But the building still exists, right? Unlike the site building, this in some form is, as I understand it, still standing. Is that correct?
Well, it's still standing, but I think they
filled it in. They ruined it.
They filled it in. In other words, they made it not iconic. It was built on iconography. It was an inversion or critique or a setup, shall we say, of their iconography, and they changed the whole thing. Believe it or not.
Amazing.
Yeah.
This is another piece which I only ever saw in somebody else's slide deck. Actually, now I know that site was more than just you for a period. So I don't know if you recognize this building. This is apparently by another member of the site group, Dana Draper. In 1970, so prior to some of Site's work. But I wondered if you remembered anything about the story. So as far as I understand it, this is a proposition for General Motors to have a giant.
This was a competition for General Motors, and Dana. And we were all working together, and Dana came up with this idea. He said, "Well, why don't we just put a big red stripe up the building?"
Right, it's a giant up-only economic sign that stands outside.
It was a kind of commentary. It was a more formal one that we usually or became known for, but it was it was an early project. There were a number of what happened is that the whole site grew out of a class on environmental art that I was teaching at NYU in New York, and these students were 3 or 4 of them who started. Okay, let's just continue, and it organically sort of came together, and he was definitely one of them.
Amazing.
With a lot of talent. He passed away several years ago.
Yeah.
But it was that in a way it was the sort of core period of site development.
Yeah. No, it's a proposition which I wish had been made real. I'd love to see this sculpture made. So I want to also integrate some of my work into the conversation, and I think the kind of local context and pastiche is quite an interesting conversation here. This is a building that I was lucky enough to make an installation in 2016, and it's a very well known building in Germany. It's the former communist Staatsratsgebäude, like a sort of headquarters of the Communist Party in Berlin during the GDR. And it's interesting in itself because it's a modernist building with a classical facade, a 19th century facade. I think from an earlier period, worked into the modernism. And when I first came across this building, it was being used not anymore, of course, as a communist headquarters, not even a political building explicitly, but rather a business school now. So the business school had taken over the former communist building, but they were only using half the space. So we approached them, me and Dis, the curators of the 2016 Berlin Biennale, approached the people at the ESMT and asked them if we could use the other half of the building for an exhibition that I was making as a part of the Biennale, and I made a kind of a trade fair inside this building. So again, in this kind of former communist building, with also this very beautiful communist relief. Of a kind of technology producing peace imagery. That's my interpretation of it. I made a kind of a fake trade fair for three companies that were dealing with the emerging narrative of blockchain at the time. So blockchain companies had started. People had started moving ahead, and I made a sort of a fake trade fair for three kind of strains of companies that I saw coming out of it. One from a bank, one from somebody who was very big on Bitcoin and political, and another from Ethereum, which was like an open source system using blockchain that scaled. And just to add a nod to some of your work. To do the kind of fake trade fair booth for the Ethereum section, I ripped up the carpet that was existing in the space and spray painted on the underneath of the carpet, so economy of means of certain kind, and put the branding of this emergent open source blockchain on the base of this communist building. So it was really interesting at the time because a bunch of people would come to the business school and they would accidentally end up in my trade fair and be very confused by what was going on. Yes, I also made a series of stamps. So each booth was kind of promoting a postage stamp, which I had printed at the German Bundesdruckerei. It was a collaboration between me and an illustrator artist called Linda Kentchev, who grew up in the GDR, and we used some of the GDR imagery and technology and techniques to make speculative stamps, as if these blockchain things were emergent states. Another piece I did in Sweden in the Moderna Museet was also very informed by the work you talked about with the Willie Smith material. So this was we were invited to do a pavilion, me and another architect Alexandra Bava. We were asked to do a kind of a stage for showing some of the collection, and I wanted to show a collection that was working with the language of design, but also politics explicitly. And I wanted to use a trade fair idiom again. So what we did was we used a kind of fake outside. So on this building, you can see these kind of graffiti moments. Those are all lifted graffiti from the video game Grand Theft Auto. So it's kind of fake computer game graffiti transposed onto a printed brick facade, and I integrated those with other things from the collection that resonated with the history of design and politics. So here we have some constructivist pieces alongside a Max Headroom mask, which I founded, ironically very similar to what's happening here. And we also integrated slogans from GTA, from Grand Theft Auto, alongside slogans from situationist work from the 1960s, and put kind of like former constructivist architecture in dialogue with companies and what was being made in companies. So yeah, many layers there. This is in the background. You can see a reproduction of one of the first murals commissioned in the Facebook headquarters that we also put in there. More recently, I also did some curating around blockchains and art and cryptocurrency at the Schinkel Pavilion. This is a group show that I organized, trying again to I guess use some of the principles that I found in blockchains. So blockchains always claim to be distributing power. They claim to be working with transparency. So the blockchain ledger always sort of claims that it's doing these things, and so I tried to translate that into a curatorial methodology. This is a diagram that we produced, which shows all of the people and how they were invited. So I invited a few people to the show who were working with art and blockchains at the time, and then they invited other people as well, and the power decision making was kind of made transparent for the show. The central piece was sort of an architecture piece. This is a cryptocurrency miner. It produces a lot of exhaust, and the exhaust of the cryptocurrency miner was then blowing up this giant bubble, which was a room inside the room in the show. So this was a piece by an architectural collective that went on to make a kind of blockchain for public architecture, which is still being built. Inside it was a machine by another artist collective called Distributed Gallery, where you could put euros in and burn your euros. So this is and it would issue you a token. So it was literally flaming up the money at the same time issuing you cryptocurrencies. Yeah, and this is what the after that looked like. This was also a play with nature. There were some really interesting projects. This is a project called Terra Zero, which is a collective based in Berlin. They put a tree on the blockchain so that the tree could own itself. And you donated cryptocurrency during the presentation, during the exhibition, to the tree. The tree would hold it in its wallet, and then pay the people at the organization to water it, to feed it, to do all the things that kept the tree alive. So the idea was that the networked architecture of blockchain was enabling trees to own itself. A more recent project that I did, which I think resonates with some of these themes as well, of the given, of the found, and also of like of kind of urban planning and blockchains and metaverses, are a bunch of paintings that depict metaverse properties and track their ownership, using the kind of modernism kind of inherent in their own maps is how I've said about them. So there are many metaverses being built, going up and down. Decentraland is one of them. It's one of the most used metaverses. You can buy a Decentraland token. This is what Decentraland looks like, right? When you're in there, it looks like a very familiar first-person shooter type interface. And when you go in there, there's a map. There's a city that has been built. So this is a gridded city. This is a map of the overall city that's in Decentraland, and one buys a piece of that. And then builds on it, right? So first there's a kind of speculative gridded market, and then there's a kind of a building of virtual architecture. And these are what the tokens look like if you buy a section of that property, right? This is one token that you buy. It says, I own this property. This kind of red dot in the middle of it says that's the property I own. This is some context around that property. But I guess the ghosts of modernist planning to me were very evident in these objects. So to me, these already look like kind of somehow perverted mid-century abstract paintings, right? As little squares. This came up during the frenzy of the speculative bubble around NFTs. People were buying and selling NFTs that looked a lot like this, and then there were these kind of property tokens as well. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to conflate these histories that I feel are kind of ghosts in there? So this is one of the tokens from Decentraland next to Broadway Boogie Woogie, one of the most iconic pieces of De Stijl, and also of kind of abstracted urban planning. Side by side, you can see the bleed, and it also brought up histories that didn't only morphologically look like that to me. So this is a very famous lithograph from New Zealand, where I grew up. which is a colonial landscape painting, and as being historicized by many art historians now, often landscape painting is seen both as a topological thing, as something that describes a space, but also as an early advertisement for making properties in areas of the world where private property were different before colonialism took over. So I decided that making paintings of these was both resonant, and I saw myself as a kind of a neo-colonial landscape painter in the metaverse. So these are some of the results. I used kind of layers of digital and analog. I kind of blurred and distorted, and made this kind of ghostly modernist grid come alive. And here. I also linked a couple of tokens to it, so you could, on the side there is a QR code, another gridded form where you could kind of see the original property if you scan the side, and also see a new token that tracked the owner of that property as you bought the work. So so you could kind of forever see who owned the property that your painting was of. Yes. So just to show you quickly, there's other versions of this. This is Sandbox, another one. I made other paintings of other metaverse landscapes, again using the same technique. In this case, when you buy a piece of property in Sandbox, you can change the image that represents your space on the map. So it's less controlled, and companies often buy spaces there and change it to their logo. So there's this interesting urban map that comes with logos. And again, this makes it quite different looking type of painting, which is more resonant of pop, for example. Yes. And one last thing, and then I want to return to our connections, James, and ask you more about your work. This is a commission. This is a really crazy building, a really amazing museum that is in Tasmania. It's owned by one patron, so it's a private museum. He also lives there. He made his money in gambling. So he's a mathematician who made algorithmic systems that consistently beat international gambling systems, and creams quite a lot off the top of the gambling system, and part of that he puts into building this private museum. On top of it, there's a James Turrell piece, for example. So very spectacular work is often shown there. This is what it looks like inside. And to me, the architecture is somewhat resonant of your practices as well. The cliff face is cut into. Most of the galleries are subterranean, and this is the existing cliff face built into that museum. To me, it was kind of like it suggested a sort of a mining space. It was like you were going into a museum in a mine. And when I was asked to make an exhibition there, I wanted to reflect all of the things that were involved in that context. I was reading Kate Crawford's and Vlad Njola's Anatomy of an AI System, which looked about making AI and the connections between human labor and the kind of minerals in the earth that make AI systems, making them all visible at once. And I was thinking about that as I made this show. This is an exhibition. Part of the exhibition was the first room. This room was quite an empty room, and in it was a blown-up drawing, which is a drawing that is from an Amazon.com patent of a design that they never made to house a user on top of a robot that's in their organizing systems, so that a user could enter their algorithmic systems and be a kind of a part of what was otherwise a human exclusion zone in their sorting warehouses. I made that into a sculpture. I copied the drawing and kind of made it 3D as if it was going to be built, but kept some of the parts of the kind of conventions of drawing on the object, right? So you still have these kind of weird remnants of the kind of numbers that point to the parts of that system that are always used in patents. And I also built an augmented reality layer on top of it, which when you scan the thing with a phone, meant that a bird was living inside the Amazon worker cage. And so you have this really magical moment when you look through your phone when you can see this bird. And this is not just any bird. It was compiled from the most endangered bird in Australia at the time. So we had a group of researchers go out and record their sound. And then we animated that. So that you can see people looking through their devices into this cage, which I found a really amazing thing to see from the outside as well as just in the AI system. And then we based the show also on the most popular mid-century Australian game, which is a sheep farming economic simulation called Squatter. So this was the game also that the founder of the museum played every day when he was growing up with his family. And I made them produce a new version of this called Extractor, based not on sheep farming but on kind of data extraction mechanisms. And yeah. I made display sculptures based on kind of cardboard cutout in-store displays. This one for a Monopoly was one of my models, and this one for a kind of chocolate was also another one of my models for the sculptures. And here the sculptures were based on extraction hardware that is involved in mining in Australia. So actual kind of physical mining, and that was the kind of point of display sales point for the game that we produced that was part of the show, and it was on a giant squatter board. So users went in there and kind of looked at these cardboard displays of mining equipment, and then also scanned again triggers on an augmented reality thing that showed you advertisements for these machines. So and you could also scan yourself and see how you are feeling. So here's the interface where a user scans themselves and sees one of the minerals come out of their faces that is most mined in Australia. So this one I think is, yeah, nickel. There you go. Yeah, so here's a few of those. When I showed this also in Düsseldorf recently, and I added a kind of extra mine element to it, where I made an exhibition in Minecraft, modeling up a very famous former mine that's now a museum here in Germany. So this is the very famous mine that was used during the 19th and 20th century that is now abandoned. This is a Minecraft simulation of it that then in the basement of it contained my exhibition recreated in Minecraft. And at the opening we had a bunch of people come and do kind of Minecraft interventions. This is a self-destructing sculpture that one of the people who used the space made it. So that brings me kind of to the end of my little presentation there, James. And maybe we can go back to some of your work. I'm just going to quickly flick back through these slides.
Oh, thank you. I mean, this is terrific because it points out. You know, we really have a lot of the same interests, but you've at least chosen to put it in a context where you have poetry and literature and technology at your disposal when it's contemplation. And I remember when we started the environmental art kind of movement. It was on Green Street in Manhattan, and all of the artists involved. I mean, nobody, I guess it was Alice Aycock and Mary Miss and Dennis Oppenheim and Gordon Mattercock. We all talk about how we were going to communicate in the public domain, and it all had to be sort of instantaneous. I wrote an article, Notes from the Passing Car, where you had to you didn't have any time. You were driving by, and if the message didn't get through somehow, there was something, instantly recognizable or iconic or in verse or whatever. And it's interesting because turn the gallery inside out by returning to it or controlled visual situation and giving people a lot to think about. And you're able to deal in a sense more with poetry, with literature, with technology, with intimate visuals and everything. So, but it's what's interesting though is that we seem to have the same motivation. you want to say something, and it's basically to get somebody to think about something. As Duchamp says, it isn't so much what it is, but what it makes you think about.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that was his. In his day, for example, he had to do something incredibly radical in the art exhibition context in order to make you aware that of its kind of displacement, that he was displacing that context, making you think about the validity of it. And so it had to be, something drastically recognizable in a way, and then somehow upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the reasons we both probably ended up thinking a lot about AI these days, because there are implications in AI of the loss of the human brain. That's what my worry about it, is that like everything human beings have done with invention and with technology. I mean, I'm doing a part of my lecture right now. It's just like sitting in automobiles has made people unbelievably obese. Clearing the land for industrial farming has given us McDonald's and fast food and unhealthy diets. These all things. If you get too laid back, which societies do, and think about it, passively. Oh well, I just accepted, and that's what I'm a little afraid about AI. Oh well, that's a new technology. We'll just accept it, and anything it purports to deliver, and that's not really true.
Yeah, that's so interesting you say that, because
it needs a real critical thought. It needs some critical dialogue. It really does.
Well, that's so interesting because Kate Crawford, who I mentioned earlier as one of the preeminent critical thinkers that I look to for AI, and one of the things that she and her peers have pointed out about AI as it emerged is that it is somehow reliving and reperforming the past. And
yes.
Maybe in a similar way that postmodernism sort of claims to as a part of this.
Exactly.
It's trained on training sets that are kind of then training machines to draw on the past to kind of push into the future, and that means I think that what they highlight is that means that one of the dangers of the proliferation of automated systems trained on the past but making things for the present and the future is that they recapitulate the past again, right, and all of the kind of value systems and biases of the past get kind of like pulled into the contemporary into the future. Do you have thoughts along those lines?
Yeah. Well, you were doing. I think we have exactly the same point of view here. I mean, I really reinforce the fact. But the fact is that what you're doing is finding like the means itself as a comment on itself. I think that's the thing we both have in common. We take the terms of the media or the art form or the whatever it is, whether it's public space or an interior gallery or a museum or whatever, and you take it and you use what they've already given, the given quantities, and turn them inside out.
Yeah.
And that is a problem with AI. It is what it is. It's depends on information, digital information that's already been processed. So it doesn't think really. What it does is delivers. There's a deliverable, in other words, and that deliverable is not intuition. I mean, the point I make is, the human brain requires vision and sound and body temperature. I mean, there's so many other factors that make the human brain creative. So I just make the case that I think we both agree that it's got to somehow remain creative. In other words, it's not what AI is. It's what it is that can be rethought. And my whole life, every meeting we have, I'm calling this lecture what else can it mean, or what it makes you think about.
One of the things that I wanted to
every meeting I ever sat down to, we always start in architecture with the function and the form and the situation and whatever. And then I would always at some point and say, well, we know all that stuff. What else does it mean? What else could it mean? And I think we both asked that question.
Yeah, this brings me to another point that I really want to ask you also while I have you. This is because one of the things you brought up in your presentation was the importance of foregrounding other people's interests, right? You are kind of as an architect's practice, part of making the context and the found the most important part of the architecture is like backgrounding the architecture a little bit and foregrounding the people. So you mentioned that with public sculptures. You mentioned that with this great high rise of individual choice, right? That other people's decisions, the people who would use the space's decisions, their content, so to speak, becomes part of the form. And it struck me that has a real resonance with the era that we're sort of still in, but that started about 15 years ago, of so-called user-generated content in the context of social media, right? So the idea, the business model for things like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and things that we still use, is that like the company is the platform, and the users provide the content. And I wondered about. I mean, this is kind of an inversion in some ways of what you tried to do, but it has a resonance as well, right? Where the kind of people's expressions become the front page of what's happening on the platform. Have you thought about social networking and kind of social media as a platform in relation to that gesture in your work?
Yeah, the point I was making, I think, is that I'm very concerned with performance, and we've done performance pieces and everything over the years. And in fact, that's the problem of talking about sight. We've worked in so many different media, including videos and so forth, that it's hard to sum it up. But that one issue is the content and finding a way to say it, whether it's by using familiarity, an inversion of familiarity, or taking familiarity itself and extending it. But I think the big challenge we both face is familiarity is the reason that things take place anyway. They're a part of performance. We perform in everything. Our mental performance, our physical performance, are part of routines. And to somehow invert them or change their meaning is a really big challenge. But it's also kind of the only way. It's the only way to get people to think. If they're used to a slogan, and suddenly the slogan, instead of meaning one thing, it means 5 different things. They really have to think about it. They have to step back and say, well, I never thought about it that way. In fact, I've always said the highest compliment I've ever received is when somebody comes up to me, well, they look at one of our buildings and somebody said, "I never thought about a building before." And that is precisely the whole point of it.
Amazing, amazing. And that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. Actually, I mean, we started this conversation a little bit with foregrounding the commissioner, and you worked with people like the Isuzu project, which was great to hear a little bit more about. And McDonald's, obviously. You've worked with a lot of corporations that you're seemingly also, in some ways, against the principles of, right? You were just mentioning McDonald'sization has made people, too big, and that's part of a problem. Can you talk about the ambivalence of kind of working with iconography that is also something that you're in the process of critiquing?
Well, the problem with the commercial world is that it deserves a lot of critique, and it's very difficult to think about critical context. In other words, most of our projects are what I would call self-effacing in a way. For an industry to use one of them as part of their production or patronage or whatever is a certain amount of courage. People always ask us, well, how did you get Sidney and Francis Luther to do it in the first place? This is obviously a critique of their whole industry. And I said, well, because there's something very powerful about self-effacing work or self-effacing ideas. They're very people like them. They relax with them. And I always use the example is like Liberace or Elvis Presley. And their greatest performances, they knew they were great musicians. They didn't have to keep pounding away and telling you about it. So what they were doing, they'd be laid back, and they would do, in a sense, self-criticism or self-mockery, or kidding themselves, or hyperbolizing some flaw or fault or something, and that would relax the audience. It invited the audience into it. And I remember a whole concert with Elvis Presley, doing that, and the audience were just lapping it up. And then he ends the whole concert. It was in by singing "Amazing Grace." Well, you can imagine it brought down the house.